Hi there. I'm David Meshaninov, and I'm a mind-body psychotherapist. And I'm here today to talk with you about 5 steps to begin healing from childhood hurt and trauma. Now, the first step that I want to mention, in a way, is the easiest one, but an important one to start off with. And that's to believe that you can heal. What I mean by that is even if you've tried for a really long time to figure out how to get out of the knot that you're in, to figure out how to get through the blocks that you're having or the symptoms that you're facing, if it's anxiety or depression or other issues that you're struggling with, I want to say that getting the right direction and the right insight and tools that specifically mind-body psychotherapy can offer can really allow a breakthrough that before couldn't happen. And I see it in my office every day. People being able to make those steps forward and breakthroughs that before just seemed unattainable and they were sort of going in circles. So I want in this first step for you just to hear that with the right direction and the right tools, you can really have beautiful, amazing healing and improvement of your life. And it's just about getting the right direction and the right insight. That's for the first point. Okay, so the second step is called understanding your defenses. Now, to explain this step, we have to give a little bit of background to understand the psychology of children and the process that goes on. So the thing is like this. When children are born, they truly are vulnerable. And on a constant level, they're scanning to see, number one, if they are safe, and number two, what do they need to do to adapt or change or protect themselves so they can stay safe and survive? Because as we said, children are really, really vulnerable when they're born and as they're growing up. So a child's mind, again, is scanning around and seeing what's going on and unconsciously adjusting and changing to protect itself to survive in the world. So imagine a child who's growing up in a toxic environment, an environment where there isn't love being given or there's anger or abuse. So the child unconsciously will do something to protect itself, to be able to survive in that environment. And that protection is called a defense. So let's give a few examples of defenses, how to understand them more deeply, and how to work with them. So an example could be, and every individual's life will be different and each situation will be different, but these examples are just to give you a taste. So imagine a state where a child is feeling rejected, where maybe they're feeling belittled or not loved for who they are as themselves. They're being ignored or rejected or belittled. So that's a pain that goes very deep. That's a pain that goes very deep into the person, and their psyche's going to do something to protect themselves. And what it might do is it might create a pattern of defense where they say, we're never going to get close to someone, or we're never going to let ourselves be hurt like this again because of how painful this was, this original rejection in the family of origin. Another example of a defense could be a child who grows up in a home where the parent isn't predictable and maybe at times has fits of rage and really makes a sense of it being unsafe for the child. So what the child might do then, their defense, for example, in this case, might be to say we always have to stay focused and on guard to make sure that we're not in harm's way. And this particular type of defense, in one way, can be helpful because it keeps the person focused and maybe they got a lot done. But on a deeper level, what it's saying is that their system is never going to allow them to let go and relax. And think about what a cost that is. They can never truly just be in the moment or truly allow themselves to relax and feel at peace, because the defense is telling them you can't do that because to feel safe, you have to be on high alert. I want to say one more point around defenses before we discuss how to work with them, which is that at times these defenses are created when there's a clear toxic event going on, like an abuse or a parent that is rejecting or gets angry very frequently. But also bear in mind that at times it could be more subtle. But particularly as children, we're very sensitive and we pick up on these subtle indications that unless you're this way, you won't get the full amount of love, or unless you're this way, you won't be accepted. And those can lead to defenses as well, like a child thinking, I always have to do great in school, I always have to succeed to be accepted or to be loved. And then unconsciously, they'll always feel they need to act that way. So again, keep in mind it can be from more intense things, or particularly for sensitive children, or just the sensitivity of children in general, it can be something more subtle. So now let's move on to what we should do about these defenses. Now let's go back to one of the examples of the child who felt that they had to always be on guard and always be alert, and they couldn't really allow their system to relax. That was their defense. So at first, it might seem the best way to go is to try to muscle through that in a way, just saying, you know what, I'm going to stop being uptight. I'm going to start acting more relaxed now. Or even looking at this defense with a certain level of annoyance or a certain level of frustration, like, why can't this part of me just go away? Why can't I just allow myself to be more a different way? So the first step that I want to say is we really need to start with validation and realizing that the defense came to protect the person, that they really were in so much pain, that they were maybe feeling so lonely or felt at such risk of losing love or acceptance, or they felt so unsafe. And that terror or this deep pain that they might have been experiencing caused this defense to come. And that's what's holding on so tight from them being able to move on or shake it off, because the defense feels that it needs to stay there to protect the person. So the first step is to validate it and say, as if you're speaking to the defense and saying, I get how much pain is here. You can even tell that to yourself. Start being aware of how much pain is underneath that defense of why it needed to be created. And then realizing that the defense isn't just something that needs to be bullied away, but validating it and telling it you understand why it's there and the pain that was caused that brought it about to begin with. Once you're able to do that and start talking to it and validating it in this softer way, then a few other things open up, and these are a few next steps that can be done, which I'll express now. So one way to begin working with this defense in a softer way is to say, could we just imagine in our fantasy perhaps what it would be like to have an experience without this defense? So you're not asking the defense in real life to go away, but you're just introducing it softly, saying, let's imagine what it would be like to go through my day or go through my responsibilities if I did feel safe in the world and I didn't need this protection. Or what it would be like to meet someone where I didn't have to have this protection because of that original wounding around rejection, or whatever that might be. Another example like that in real life might say, what if you ask the defense, yes, you don't have to go away entirely, what if you just stood to the side a little bit watching, and if you needed, you could come back in? Or what if you stepped away just 50% and we can play with a little bit of a new way, which perhaps can be most beneficial for me now in my life? So again, what you're trying to do is realizing that the defense is really going to stay there because it feels it needs to be there to protect you. But if you validate it and play with it in this softer way by giving it some options, how it can move to the side a little, but where it still feels it can be involved, that can be a way where it begins to loosen. Another step that can be helpful to begin working with this defense is thinking back to perhaps part of the pain that came about was through the perspective of a child. For example, let's say you have a parent who was getting very angry at the child, and the child interpreted that they weren't loved or their parent didn't care about them. But sometimes when you look back at the situation as an adult, you see my parent maybe struggled partially with loving me, but maybe they also were just overwhelmed themselves with what they were going through and their own stressors. And then when you're able to bring an adult perspective back to those original woundings, it helps lighten it a little bit and can help tell the defense, right then that's how it was experienced as a child, but we can see that that original premise that I wasn't loved for who I was wasn't fully true. And part of it was just my parent didn't have space from what they were going through. Then that can allow the defense to melt a little bit as well. Another cognitive process that one can go through is thinking, my life today, how much needed is the defense compared to when I was younger? Meaning, if when the child was younger, maybe they were surrounded by people that they didn't need to be on edge or they didn't need to protect themselves from. But perhaps now they're surrounded by people who love them or are safer. So in talking to the defense, one can say, I so much appreciate that you were created and came about when I needed you, but now the events in my life have changed and are safer. Perhaps we can play with beginning to let go or move to the background a little bit more.
So at this point, I would like to invite you to look at your own life and think, what was your core pain that you went through growing up? Was it perhaps a sense of feeling rejected or not loved, or a sense of feeling on edge or fear? Or go into what was the core pain that you might have experienced as a child? And then think, what was the defense that naturally and healthfully you took on as a response to that? How did you change from the way now you needed to be in the world? What was the defense that you took on? Once you get clear on that, see how you can validate that defense and see how it was coming to help you. But then also see how you can begin, through respect, negotiating with it and seeing how there can be space to allow a different way to begin coming through. So take a minute to see how this all applies to you. And if you don't have full clarity around it, that's okay. But these are great things to begin thinking about and begin asking yourself.
So that's the second step of working with defenses, understanding them, validating them, and then slowly beginning to work with them so they can begin to melt away as opposed to just pushing them away. In the next steps, we're going to cover the important part of the mind-body connection and the importance of getting back in touch with your body and healing on the mind-body level as well to give a complete picture of what's needed to heal from childhood trauma. We're going to talk about disassociation, armoring, on how we can work with our body and our nervous system to really get past the struggles and the blocks that you've been feeling, to experience life from a healed place, a whole place, and even a greater strength from coming through the adversity that you've been through. I look forward to sharing with you in the next video the next steps.